Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to set up your action bars in RuneScape so that they switch with your weapon style. When you change your weapon to a different style, that your action bar of abilities that are automatically used switches with it. This is quite useful, especially if you use different combat styles and you want the abilities to adjust depending on which weapon you equip. Now, to be clear, I'm talking here about what's known as RuneScape 3 in the community, the continuation of the original RuneScape. This is not old school RuneScape because there are no ability bars there. So, what you'll want to do is go to your settings. And I'm in Revolution mode, which means that we have some abilities that are triggered automatically, specifically the ones that are surrounded by this yellow box here. I've made it the full 14. And I also have all abilities set to trigger. This doesn't matter, I'm showing this to you guys, right? What's useful then is to go to the next tab, the action bar tab, and to name all of your action bars with what's on them. So for example, I have named all of my action bars here depending on what types of things I put onto each action bar. And you'll notice I have 4 action bars displayed on screen. I have this one here. This is basically the Revolution bar, things that I want to trigger automatically in combat. And then I have 3 additional action bars down here. And I have one that has sort of some movement abilities, some defensive abilities, some prayers, and then I have some additional combat abilities that I want to use regardless of combat style, and then at the top I have some space where I can deposit some things that I want to trigger manually but that are style dependent. So that's kind of the setup I have, and I want these 2 bars here to stay the same, and this one over here to switch depending on which weapon I have. So what you want to do there is you want to go to the action bar binding tab, and you want to have these 2 boxes ticked to have action bar binding. And now it gets a bit complicated, so bear with me. I'll try to explain it. So basically you have 18 possible or 18 setups here, and each one is basically you're telling it, what do I want action bar 1 to 18, you have one for each of those, what do I want it to do, how do I want that one to adjust? So my action bar number 1 is the movement one. I don't want that one to do anything, so I have it set to none. I don't want it to switch. So it's set to none, and it's also set to none here, and it's, just no changes. Same thing for action bar 2. That's basically the additional abilities that I have here. I also don't want that to change, so I have it set to none. Now it gets interesting. So action bar number 3, I have that one set up as melee two-handed, is what I named it when I renamed it. This is just the names of the bars. It's useful to name them according to what you want them to do, otherwise this is horribly intransparent what you're changing here. So I want, when I equip a two-handed melee weapon, like this one, then basically this is the selection for the weapon style that you want to take an effect. Then I want the main action bar, that is this one here, the one with the yellow thing around it. I don't want one of my additional action bars, which would be these here. I want the main action bar to switch to the preset number 3, which I've named melee two-handed. If that makes sense, right? I'll go through a couple more of this so we'll see it. Then I have a melee dual wield. This one, if I equip a one-handed melee weapon, specifically the main hand, not the offhand, then it will switch the main action bar to the preset that I selected here, which is the melee dual wield preset. And that's very similar to the two-handed one, but it has some abilities that are different because they require dual wielding. Right? And then if we go on, like my ranged two-handed, if I do that, basically if I equip a two-handed ranged weapon, I want the main action bar to switch to this bar. If I equip ranged dual wield, I want the main action bar to switch to dual wield. And magic, they changed it so that there are no abilities that require dual wield or two-handed. So I only have one action bar. So I have magic any. If any sort of magic weapon equipped, I want the main action bar to switch to my magic action bar. I could have dual wield or two-handed. I used to have that, but that's not needed anymore, right? And then we have some more things to look at. So up until now, we've always been switching the main action bar, this one. But now I also want, if I equip a melee weapon, I want my abilities here. I want melee abilities, some ultimate abilities here, and maybe some things that I wanted to trigger manually for some reason. I want that to also switch. So I want additional action bar number 3 to switch when I equip any melee weapon to my melee ultimates bar. And then I have the same thing here for ranged. If I equip any ranged weapon, I want this additional action bar here to show the one that I've set up with ranged ultimates. And if I equip any magic weapon, then I want this bar to show the magic ultimates. And then for necromancy, I put necromancy further down the list because free-to-play has fewer action bars. So you want to have your main combat styles earlier if you ever visit a free-to-play world. And necromancy you probably won't be using on a free-to-play world. That's basically why I did necromancy last. You could do this, but currently necromancy only has dual wield, so do necromancy any. I want this action bar to switch to my necromancy preset. And then I've got some additional presets. Like basically, when we've gone down the list, we've basically gone down through 3 here all the way to 11. And then I've got some additional ones. Yeah. So basically 12 is one that I switch to manually when I have necromancy. If I don't want to consume adrenaline, I have one that basically I can trigger all the abilities manually that consume adrenaline, and I just build adrenaline and conjure my conjures, right? And then I have the necromancy ultimates bar. That's here on 13. I've set it up so that each bar is in the same preset as the number, otherwise it just gets too complicated. So if I equip any necromancy weapon, I want this bar here, which is my action bar 3, to switch to necromancy ultimates. Show a variety of necromancy abilities, right? And then I've got a couple more action bars that I basically haven't set up any binding for. So I have basics for melee, for ranged, and for magic. So I can switch to those manually. You can only automatically switch based on the weapon style. So you have to choose what type of action bar you want it to automatically switch to, and then anything that you want to switch to manually, you're going to have to switch to manually. But I have one that only builds adrenaline and doesn't consume it. I have that for melee. I have that for magic. And I have that for ranged. Exactly, and on those I don't differentiate between two-handed and dual wield. And then I also have a melee, basically a melee plus shield bar that has a couple abilities. Basically, doesn't have any dual wield abilities because you can't detect a shield. You can only detect what's in your main hand. So you can only detect a main hand weapon, and then if it's a two-handed weapon, it knows that it's two-handed. If it's a one-handed weapon, it switches to the dual wield bar, right? And the reason why I can't select anything here is because I've already filled, for the main action bar, I've already filled every possible thing that it can switch. If I wanted to switch, say, additional action bar 1, then I could switch it based on all kinds of things, based on, whatever selection I wanted to. But I actually don't want main action bar to switch at all. But I've already, for the main, for this one here, I've selected every possible weapon style already, so I can't set up any additional bindings. I hope this wasn't too complicated. But it's super useful, especially like if you're doing something like Dagannoth Kings, where you have 3 different combat styles, you need to switch between them to fight the 3 different ones. This is really a lifesaver. So I hope this was helpful. Leave a comment below if you want me to just like go over the actual action bars that I have set up here. I've just sort of ordered the abilities from highest damage to lowest damage, correcting for how many ticks it takes to cast them. Could be useful to use. I didn't specifically copy one from the wiki, but it ends up being fairly similar. So that's all. Thanks for listening and watching.